Greetings all. Thank you for joining our first Lunch and Learn. We are here with Priscilla from UT, is it UT Texas at Houston?
As a long name, UT School of Public Health, Houston Health Science Center.
That is a long name. And she will be talking to us today about youth vaping prevention.
Awesome. All right. So let's see. I can hear Dana okay. Someone left a comment in the chat about the volume being low. I don't know if that's on their end or on yours, but I can hear okay. I don't know if anyone else is having a hard time hearing. Or if you're having a hard time hearing me as well, let me know. Awesome. But yeah, thank you, Dana, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Okay. Yeah, I'm Priscilla Garza. I'm also, in addition to being a student, a PhD student at UT, I'm also a trainer with Catch Global Foundation. And that's kind of how we made the connection for today's presentation. And so like Dana said, we're going to be talking about youth vaping prevention. I'm super excited that you guys are joining us today and that you're excited to be a part of that conversation. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay, Dana. We're
Yes,
good to
please.
Okay, and we will just spend the next right under an hour just kind of having a conversation. We do like interaction. We do trainings across the country, and we are also virtual. So I would love for you guys to feel comfortable using the chat feature. And so I'm actually going to open up my chat box before I begin so that I don't miss anything. If you guys have questions throughout, or again, you just want to engage with us today, feel free to use that chat feature. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So I know that, Dana already kind of introduced this and talked a little bit about it. You probably received her flyer. But, at this point, the U.S. Surgeon General has stated that this is a problem. It's an epidemic nationwide, so nationally. So in other words, we are in a crisis, and we know that it's imperative that we act quickly to stop this problem from spiraling further out of control. And like you guys know, by participating today, you are arming yourself with important tools in this battle. And you are going to become a vital part of the solution. So I'm going to quickly just show you the agenda. So these are the high points for today. This is what you can expect for us to go through together. We are really happy that you're here and that you're going to be a part of this conversation as we learn together how we can combat this youth vaping epidemic. So we'll start with an introduction to what e-cigarettes are. We'll talk a little bit about statistics and some of the more recent laws that pertain to tobacco and pertain specifically to youth tobacco use. And then we'll get through some videos. We have some activities lined out for you as well. So love for that participation. And then we'll close out with just a conversation around some other tools that you can have in your tool belt for making that change in your communities. And so before we really dive into the conversation, I just want to take a moment to create the safe space for today's workshop. So we are going to be talking about, a lot of things. Some things may be personal, some things may be hard to talk about because this is not an easy topic. This is not something that's familiar to a lot of folks. And so we just want to acknowledge that. A safe space is a climate that allows everyone to feel secure enough to take risks, honestly express their views, and share and explore their knowledge, attitudes, and behaviors with one another. So, like I said, we're using the chat feature today, but even in that, we just want to be mindful and respectful of everyone in the room. So yeah, we will, just practice using active listening, affirming everyone's emotions. If we do have this time for discussion and things like that, we just want to make sure that we're being respectful and that we're recognizing and validating everyone's experiences. And then, we won't really have a physical community contract since we're not in person, but this is something we do even in the classroom with students. At the beginning of the year, we just create this community contract, or it's just this understanding that we have these common and established goals and ground rules. So again, we want to be mindful of everyone today. And I'm sure that that's not going to be a problem, but we like to start out that way. So I've mentioned Catch. I've mentioned that I work for Catch Global. Catch is actually an acronym. We are a coordinated approach to child health. We are a foundation now that is global, and it started in the 1980s as an evidence-based program that was targeting nutrition, heart disease and diabetes, physical activity. And so now we have a bunch of other programs. So I will leave my contact information for you guys at the end if you are interested in learning about any other of our school-based prevention programs that are also evidence-based. So at Catch Global, we launch kids towards healthier lifestyles by linking underserved schools and communities to the resources needed to create and sustain a healthy change for future generations. So we do have some low-cost and no-cost evidence-based curriculum, including PE, nutrition, SEL, even sun safety, oral health, and of course, youth vaping prevention. And so we're going to actually start off by diving into the youth vaping epidemic. So, what are we talking about here? So at the national level, this is the data that we have from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, which is a survey administered by the CDC every year for students between 6th and 12th grade. And it asks them questions about their relationship with tobacco products. And so this is specifically data that pertains to e-cigarettes, because there are a lot of tobacco products out there, but according to the data, e-cigarettes have taken the tobacco world by storm, and it is the top or most preferred tobacco product for youth. And then beyond that, like you can see in the middle there, disposable e-cigarettes are the most popular type of e-cigarettes. In a minute, I'm going to show you guys kind of the evolution of e-cigarettes over the years, but this is where we are right now at a national level. Their estimations are that 14% of high school students and a little over 3% of middle school students are using e-cigarettes. And one of the things that really stands out to us, and it is concerning, is the amount of students that are using these products frequently or even every day. And that suggests that there's a strong dependence on nicotine. And that's something that a lot of people don't realize, that at some point early on, it becomes an addiction or a dependence. And then another thing just to note here is that almost 85% of users are using flavored e-cigarettes. If you guys want the article that was released from the FDA, let me know and I can send Dana that link if you want more information about this data. So we're going to start out by defining an e-cigarette. And so e-cigarettes are battery-powered devices that heat and disperse the liquid that is inhaled into the lungs. We compare e-cigarettes to phones or computers because whether you have an iPhone or an Android or a Mac or a PC, they all essentially do the same thing and they have the same parts, but they look very different. And that is the case here with e-cigarettes. So as you can see on the screen, all e-cigarettes contain a battery, a microprocessor, an atomizer, and a cartridge. Or a tank. So there are many variations on the mechanism, but the basic process is the same. And so what happens is the microprocessor senses the change in pressure when the user inhales on the end of the e-cigarette. The microprocessor then instructs the atomizer to activate the heater and vaporize the liquid, which the smoker inhales through that mouthpiece. The vapor is then drawn into the body as the same way as with regular cigarettes. And then we also need to define vapor. So there are some misunderstandings or myths around what really is in an e-cigarette. So vapor is actually a substance diffused or suspended in the air, one that is normally a liquid or a solid. So, a lot of folks think about steam that comes from, boiling water inside of a tea kettle. But in reality, what's happening here is that it's actually an aerosolized vapor. An aerosol is a substance that's enclosed under pressure. It's able to be released as a fine spray, typically by means of a propellant gas. So things like hairspray, those are aerosols. And so the thing about vaping, that term, is actually a slang term that is used for describing someone that's using an e-cigarette. It's also a term that's meant to make e-cigarette use sound less harmful than it really is. Another thing about it is that there is no water in e-liquid. So just kind of looking at that diagram, again, the battery and the heater are really small, and in reality, there's not a whole lot of liquid that can actually fit in there. So what happens is the battery can't get hot enough for that liquid to become a vapor. So that e-liquid has a lot of different chemicals that make it get hot fast enough. And so like if you're cooking in the kitchen and you have water that you're boiling for spaghetti, if you just have water, it'll take it a while to boil. But if you put salt or oil, those chemicals will make that water boil faster. That's the concept here with e-liquid. So there's a lot of harmful chemicals that they put into that that make that liquid get hot enough to produce the aerosol. And so This next slide is just showing you kind of the evolution or the change over the years between different vaping devices. So they do come in different forms. I've mentioned disposables, but before that, the most popular were the rechargeable ones. We've also seen tanks and other type of refillable systems. And so if we're starting on the left-hand side, that is the first generation of disposable e-cigarettes. They resembled the look or the shape of the traditional cigarette, and they were intended to be used until the liquid ran out, at which point they were to be discarded. Then the next one over is a second generation. Those were those vape pens. I remember a lot of teachers talking about vape pens back in the day because they were really hard to tell whether they were regular pens or e-cigarettes. And those had a small refillable tank and a battery that could be recharged. The third generation, those were the tanks. I still see these. For me personally, I see a lot of adults, preferring to use these tanks. They're really large. And they have rechargeable batteries and a large refillable cartridge. Some folks call them mods because a lot of the times they break them open and modify those parts. The fourth generation, you may recognize the most popular one in this one, which was the Juul. These were like high tech, they were easily rechargeable, and they used small disposable pods that contained the e-liquid that was inserted into that larger Juul device. And a lot of times they could be confused for a USB drive, especially because they look like it and because they could be charged in computers and laptops. That was a huge game changer. They became so popular in 2018, they actually spawned their own terminology. So back in that point in time, around 2018, 2019, students who were using Juuls really wouldn't consider themselves as vaping or using an e-cigarette, but they said that they were juuling. And so, other brands also followed Juul's high-tech design and high nicotine delivery through the use of salt e-liquid variations. And then the next one that came over, that is the fifth generation. They are those disposable e-cigarettes. They came back around. And we believe it's because of the recent flavor bans that have been enacted by the FDA over the past 3 years or so. These have been on the rise in popularity since 2020, and they come in many flavors. They often have a high nicotine concentration as well. And again, they're not part of the flavor bans that we're going to talk about next. But just so y'all know, regardless of what generation, they're all variations of e-cigarettes, and they all come with similar health and social consequences. Just to give you an idea of what's been out there, these are all examples on the screen of products that have been banned by the FDA because they're intentionally mimicking food products, especially products that are popular among children. And so there are more than 8,000 flavors, though, still out there. And so, some folks refer to this e-liquid as e-juice, which is another slang term, again, making it sound a little less dangerous. And more often than not, there is nicotine found in this and flavoring chemicals, even on the products that say that contain 0% nicotine. And the use of flavors to mask the harshness of tobacco is a seductive and deceptive marketing tactic that has been used by the tobacco industry for decades. So this is not new. And that included products like menthol cigarettes, fruit-flavored cigars. So this is not the first time. The thing about e-cigarette vapor or that aerosolized vapor is that it lacks the harsh burn of traditional cigarettes, making that first puff that much friendlier on the palate and making it easier for kids to take up the habit. And that's not to mention the flavors that also entice the kids further. Back in 2015, the Journal of the American Medical Association reported that 81% of kids who ever used tobacco products started with a flavored product. Unfortunately, that trend continues as the 2022 National Youth Tobacco Survey tells us that almost 85% of current e-cigarette users say that they're using flavored e-cigarettes. And then they go further into asking the students that checked yes, what their favorite flavors are, just to give us an idea. So to give you an idea, the top flavor was fruit. Which is crazy. We want kids to eat fruit. And so they're coming after kids with fruit flavors. The second most popular were candy flavors. And so there was a similar pattern observed among specifically targeting those disposable e-cigarettes, with fruit and candy being the top two flavors. The FDA has taken some steps, like I've mentioned, to mitigate the appeal to youth by prohibiting the packaging that intentionally mimics food products, like the examples that you see here on your screen. But the thing is that although the FDA has implemented those restrictions on labeling requirements, they're limited and inconsistently applied, which makes it hard for the consumer to know exactly what is in that e-liquid. And so those companies are required to submit the ingredients in their product to the FDA, but they're not required to put that on the packaging. So if you go to the store, you pick up chips or cookies, you can look at the back and know exactly how many calories, you know exactly the ingredients, you know what's in it. That's not the same for e-cigarette or e-liquid. You don't know what's in them because it's not required for them to tell you what's in that. And again, some of the products that say, that they contain 0% nicotine, when they're tested in a lab, they do contain nicotine. Just a couple more slides here. The disposable epidemic I've mentioned before, since around 2020, we saw this huge increase and kids shifted from using Juul products and those types of systems to using disposable systems. And so to feed that frequent or daily habit that we talked about earlier, young vaping teens are having to find ways to get their fix amid those restrictions that we talked about. And so the flavor ban that we alluded to only covered those pre-filled pods and cartridges. That meant that those disposable e-cigarettes were still widely available. And so between 2019 to 2020, as you can see on your screen, disposable e-cigarette use increased about 1,000% among high school students and about 400% among middle school students who are current e-cigarette users. And like I've said, that trend continues even into 2022 because the most popular type of e-cigarette device among youth who are using is that disposable e-cigarette. Here's another statistic that scares the public health community. Despite the overall decrease in youth using traditional, cigarettes, the data from the National Youth Tobacco Survey shows us that there's an overall increase in tobacco use, and that is thanks to these e-cigarettes. A study published in 2021 found that e-cigarette users who were non-smokers had about 3 times the odds of initiating or currently smoking combustible cigarettes compared with non-e-cigarette users who are non-smokers. The alarming rates at which youth are beginning to vape is undermining the progress that has been made over all these years toward reducing overall tobacco use. Approximately 3 in 10 students who currently use any tobacco product reported using 2 or more tobacco products during the past 30 days. And so you guys may have heard this, but e-cigarettes may be an off-ramp for some older long-time smokers, but they're already a huge on-ramp for these new young smokers. A fact here is that big tobacco actually used the term replacement smokers in the 80s to refer to the young people that they needed to draw into tobacco use in order to replace their dying customers. And perhaps the link between vaping and smoking pulls back the veil on the tobacco industry's motives behind their multi-billion-dollar investments in e-cigarette companies. Recently, there was a $12.8 billion investment by Altria, who's the parent company of Philip Morris, into Juul. That was in 2018. So to us, it's pretty clear that the new replacement smokers for big tobacco are today's young vaping teens. Another contributor to this increase, is marketing. There has been so much money poured into marketing and advertisement in the past few years for e-cigarettes. And this is data from 2021's National Youth Tobacco Survey. As you can see, 7 in 10 kids report that they're regularly exposed to e-cigarette advertisements. And then the next chart down just shows you a breakdown of where students are being exposed to these ads. So it's really important, to teach kids to recognize e-cigarette ads, which can be stealthy and subtle on social media, so that they can understand when they're being sold something. Even if you think about your own social media use, we can control who we follow, who follows us, who's friends with us, but we can't really control the advertisement that pops up. So we have to think about that. And we also have to think about the influencers and the celebrities that might be using these products and posting about them. And our vaping prevention program called Catch My Breath helps students dissect advertisements, whether direct or indirect, to understand when they're being sold something. And researchers found that early on in Juul's campaigns, they clearly targeted young audiences. They crafted their brands and advertisements around strategies that were appealing to teenagers. They also had a very strong social media presence. They used hashtags, peer-to-peer promotion through activities like Juul challenges, which were stunts or activities devised by social media influencers that encourage people to take and post pictures of themselves doing various things with their devices. These kind of guerrilla social media tactics create the illusion of grassroots or genuine enthusiasm and activity, but they're actually meticulously coordinated and strategic marketing campaigns. Sometimes they're mockingly referred to as AstroTurf because they're fake grassroots campaigns. So it's no wonder to us that with Juul's extensive marketing, that in just over 1 year's time, Juul jumped from owning 24% of the overall e-cigarette market in August of 2017 to owning over 70% of that market in October of 2018. And lastly here, just to give you an idea of the data behind this, Juul's rapid rise in popularity was, again, due to their strong social media presence. So much so other products also copied them because they saw that it was working. Other companies created a spot the vape technique to show users how easy these devices are to hide. This is just an example of a vape that's sitting right in between makeup, and you really wouldn't be able to tell it. That's not an eyeliner pin, that's a vape device. Dana, did you have a question or something to add?
Oh no, why am I unmuted? Oh my gosh,
Oh,
I'm sorry, y'all.
you're fine.
I was gonna say, they look like highlighters now. We've had a few that
Yeah.
look just like a highlighter.
Yes, I do have an example of that later. So
Okay.
exactly right, and it's just crazy to me.
Yeah, it's hard for us to find them. Okay, I'm going back on mute.
No, you're good. So just to wrap up this part of the conversation, 91.5% of US middle and high school students said that they use social media, which I don't find surprising. But what I did find surprising in that data set was that among all social media users, 73.5% of them said that they saw e-cigarette related posts or content. That's a huge percentage of our youth are seeing these things. And again, they may not be able to control what they're seeing. So this is really important. We have to understand how important social media is in all this. Popular apps like TikTok and YouTube oftentimes will show influencers using e-cigarettes, making it look like the cool thing to do. So, we need to not only educate our youth on the health effects, which we're going to talk about next, but we also have to teach them about the mistruths that they're going to find in advertisements. And again, in our curriculum for Catch My Breath, we actually address both of these things. And so, we've talked about some laws that are restricting, we've talked about laws that restrict certain flavors and packaging. We really do have to put our best foot forward to restrict or to prevent addiction from happening at an early age. The thing is that we are all born with a potential for addiction, and it can manifest in different ways. For some people, it's alcohol addiction. Other people, it can be social media or exercise, even caffeine. So what's the big deal, or what's the problem with e-cigarettes? Well, the thing is that using nicotine in adolescence can harm the parts of the brain that control attention, learning, mood, and impulse control. And to understand how this works, we have to go over a little bit of biology. So each time a new memory is created or a new skill is learned, stronger connections or synapses are built between brain cells. And young people's brains build synapses faster than adult brains. That's why they're so quick at learning. And nicotine changes the way these synapses are formed, interfering with the brain's sensitive pleasure and rewards feedback loop. Because of this, nicotine in adolescence may also increase the risk for future addiction to other drugs. So it's important to note that until recently, Juul was the leader in the vaping market with really high nicotine concentrations at 5%. And this is still the case even with those newer products like the highlighters that you're talking about. And that's in a single pod. So what did that mean? Well, the amount of nicotine in a single Juul pod and in some disposables, like I said, is equal to the amount of nicotine found in an entire pack of cigarettes and can include the same amount of puffs, which is about 200. Although now I'm seeing some are saying 2,000 puffs in one product. So it's really hard to tell how much of this stuff they're getting in their system at a time, depending on how often they're using the device, how deeply they're inhaling. And so some kids are developing nicotine habits equivalent to a 2-pack-a-day smoker. And in some cases more, because this is actually higher number now with some of these new products. But now other e-cigarette brands like like the ones that you talked about a second ago, are following suit. And a lot of them are disposable e-cigarettes. Puff was one that recently went around some of the laws that were coming out around those flavors. They're disposable, so they're not part of the flavor ban. And those are the most popular among the kids because, again, they still offer them in a lot of flavors. And so since the human brain continues to develop until about the age of 25, as you can see on your screen, we need to prevent youth now from experimenting with vaping and using other nicotine products, as we are much less likely to become addicted if we do pick up a cigarette or nicotine product after the age of 25. So, just to kind of wrap up this conversation around, hey, it's not safe. And there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of different ideas circulating for the past few years about this idea. So we like to tackle it up front. So the vapor or the aerosolized vapor that's produced and inhaled when using an e-cigarette is not harmless. And in fact, it often contains many harmful ingredients. And while e-cigarette vapor generally contains fewer harmful chemicals than smoke from burned tobacco, it's really important to keep in mind that there's a difference between less harm and harmless, right? Something we don't tell kids, but something we tell our adult learners is that jumping out of a third-story window will cause less harm than jumping out of a 10th-floor window, but neither of those things is going to be harmless. And so e-liquid, which, is heated to become that inhaled aerosolized vapor, is the same with all e-cigarettes. And so as we learned earlier, that aerosolized vapor contains a lot of liquid particles and gaseous chemicals. And so those are some of the examples you see on the screen. So that e-cigarette aerosol that the user inhales and exhales may contain harmful and potentially cancer-causing chemicals, may also contain heavy metals, as you can see, flavorings, nicotine. Thereby, it does also affect the user's oral and respiratory systems. And research has found that the nicotine content and concentration in different vaping devices may vary. And like I've already said, a lot of times the e-cigarettes that say have no nicotine, when they're tested, they do find nicotine in them. And so, we also have to talk about why teens vape. And so, also in the National Youth Tobacco Survey, they ask students, why they choose to vape, why they chose to start, why they currently use. And the reasons kind of vary. In high school, at least, the top reason for first use was just because a friend uses them, which just points to the strong social aspect of using these things. And then, for current reasons, the most commonly reported reason was to get like a high or a buzz among our high school students. But in middle school, they actually said that their top reason for using their product is because they were feeling anxious, stressed, or depressed. That's concerning because there's a bidirectional association between nicotine use and mental health disorders like depression and anxiety. And studies found that youth with mental health disorders were at an increased risk for cigarette smoking, like we said before, but also that youth nicotine exposure was associated with the development of mental health disorders. Additionally, nicotine withdrawal is commonly accompanied by symptoms of anxiety and depression, and relief of these symptoms through the use of a nicotine-containing tobacco product might actually perpetuate continued nicotine use. So it's like this cycle that a lot of them don't realize that they are in. And so just to wrap up the conversation now, we're going to talk about the flavors and some of those laws and different products that are out there right now. So I alluded to this earlier, but in 2020, the Trump administration banned all flavored pre-filled pods except for the menthol and tobacco flavors. The FDA also finalized an enforcement policy to punish retailers caught selling unauthorized flavors of cartridge-based e-cigarettes. That was a significant step forward, but again, that was only those pre-filled pods, and it didn't cover disposable e-cigarettes. And all those flavors we talked about, they come in those disposable products. And so, although there has been recent action by the FDA to remove, disposable e-cigarettes and youth-appealing e-liquids from the market for not having the required authorization, flavors are still allowed and on the market. And again, the data shows us that kids have shifted over from brands like Juul to these inexpensive disposable products like Puff. And so there's just been so much back and forth. I hope that Puff doesn't win, but they created this synthetic nicotine product that said, hey, it's not really tobacco because we're creating it in a lab. And then a couple of years later, in an attempt to close the loophole, President Biden signed a law that gave the FDA authority to regulate all those products, even the synthetic ones, as nicotine products. And so we're hoping that does close that loophole as they're trying to figure out new ways to get around the laws. And so really the FDA has authority over all these cigarettes now, whether they're made with regular or synthetic nicotine. So there is really no excuse for failing to eliminate all flavored e-cigarettes. Because as you guys are starting to understand, every day these flavored products remain on the market, our kids remain at risk. Another law that was created in order to just help with this problem and restrict access to young children, to minors. There was a law in 2019 that raised the minimum age of sale of tobacco products from 18 years to 21 years nationwide, and that included e-cigarettes. And so again, that plays an important role in cutting off youth access to tobacco products through older friends, as the age gap now extends well beyond high school age. And so this kind of puts us at the midpoint. This next section, we're going to start off by talking about strategies to support your child's healthy decisions. So the first half of this presentation is all about giving you facts and data and all those numbers and understanding some of those risks that are associated with e-cigarette use. And now we're going to dive into one of our resources. So if you have access to the chat box, I'd like for you to open that up right now and open up that link that I just shared. It is going to take you to our parent toolkit. It is probably our most comprehensive resource that we have right now for parents and caregivers. And so we're going to go through it together, but this is going to be a little bit of interaction. There'll be some videos involved, some activities, but it'll help if you can view it. If you can't, it's okay. I'll make sure that Dana gets it over to you guys afterwards because it's a fabulous resource. But if you can, let me know if you have any questions or issues accessing.
For those of you watching the recording, I will have these attached in the YouTube video, so you'll be able to view it as an attachment as you watch the video.
Perfect. Thank you, Dana. I love it. And so this is actually going to take you through and try to give you some ideas on strategies on how to support your child's healthy decisions. And just know that checking in with your child can really help them make healthy decisions, including the decision to not use e-cigarettes. And so this is page 3 of the toolkit. And this is something that you can do on your own if you have a minute. And so, you know, as a parent, you can be doing everything right, and your child may still choose to experiment with e-cigarettes. However, we can really lower that risk by applying some of these tried and true parenting strategies. So this is just an activity that, like I said, if you have some time after this, go through it and just kind of give you an idea of, hey, you're doing some of these things, and that's great. And it'll give you also suggestions on, hey, what else can we do to help our children to make those good decisions. This is the first video that we're going to watch together. It's going to go over some strategies, again, just on how to support your child's healthy decisions. So let me click here, see what happens. It should take me to the video. Okay. And if you guys can't hear it, let me know. Let me see.
Checking in with your children can have a big effect on their decisions, including whether or not to try tobacco and e-cigarettes. In fact, children who need to check in with their parents about their free time are half as likely to try tobacco products. Checking in helps you keep track of their social activity, set rules about their free time, and tune in to when something might be wrong. A few simple rules about their free time can also prevent opportunities for risky behavior. Here are 5 strategies for checking in with your child to help them make good decisions. Where, who, when.
Ask where your child is going, who they're going with, and when they will be back.
Mom, I'm going to Daniel's house after school to work on our project for social studies.
Do I have his parents' phone numbers?
Yeah, Mom. You met his dad at parent night, remember?
Right. Thanks. Will you be back before dinner?
Yeah, his dad said he can drop me off home around 6.
Great. Have fun.
Make connections.
Know the names and contact information for their friends and their friends' parents. If you can, reach out to their friends' parents every so often to connect.
Keep them busy.
Encourage and help your children enroll in supervised after-school activities they enjoy, like sports, music, clubs, or volunteer work.
Attend school events.
School events are a great way to keep in touch with teachers, coaches, and school staff. You can also keep an open line of communication with school personnel through regular emails, phone calls, or meetings.
Set rules.
Consider age-appropriate rules like requiring adult supervision during free time or setting curfews. Be consistent in enforcing fair consequences.
Checking in with your child decreases opportunities to make risky choices about tobacco products and alerts you to possible problems. Continue watching the video series or go to www.catchmybreath.org to learn more about the e-cigarette epidemic and parent tips to support your child.
All right, so we will watch a couple of more, but I want to go ahead and take us back into our presentation. And so this is a good place to, if you want to use a chat box, just let me know. Did any of these strategies sound like something that maybe you're already doing, or even something that you would like to do? Just if you're thinking through over the next couple of slides and you want to drop some of that into the chat box, I'd love to see it. It's also good for other folks to also kind of get an idea of like, hey, maybe there's something that they hadn't tried and maybe it's something that they thought was cool. Or again, it may be something that you're already doing, and we just definitely want to encourage you all to keep doing those things. So this is taking us to page 4 of the toolkit. Let me try to put it back in full screen. That's the only thing about coming in and out. All right, so page 4 of the toolkit, this is checking in with your child, an effective way to support them, just to give you more information, specific examples. So evidence has found that children who need to check in with their children, evidence found that children who need to check in with their parents about their free time were half as likely to try tobacco products. And these are just some simple questions that break down that information. So knowing where, knowing who, and when can have a big effect on their decisions, including whether or not to try e-cigarettes. A few rules about their free time can really prevent opportunities for risky behavior. So just, know where they're going, who they're with, when they'll be back, keep them busy by enrolling them in after-school activities that they enjoy. Just like the video said, know their teachers, know their coaches, try to attend events that they participate in and make those connections with their friends' parents, and of course, setting those rules about adult supervision and curfews. And so checking in with your child really does decrease the opportunities for them to make risky choices, especially around tobacco products, and it alerts you to possible problems. And so it's, just helpful to know, what you're up against. And so check out these resources. Again, if you're following in the toolkit, you can look through this when you get a chance. And so we'll kind of continue on, but these are just ways that, again, just some tips on how you can continue to support your child. And then this next video, we'll learn how to identify e-cigarettes, vaping products, which, can be hard to spot. And so we'll also touch on some of the common signs of vaping and nicotine addiction as well.
If your child were vaping, do you think you'd know? In this video, we'll show you how easily vaping devices can hide in plain sight and also cover some of the common signs of vaping.
Spot the vape. You see these school supplies laid out on your child's desk, but some of these supplies are actually e-cigarettes. Can you spot which ones are vapes? A lot of adults struggle with spotting e-cigarettes, especially because the market changes frequently with new devices, new accessories, and new slang terms. Being aware and asking questions can go a long way. Spot the vapor.
Even if you don't find an e-cigarette in your child's possession, there are some signs that they may be vaping. These signs include a sweet, fruity, or minty smell in their room or on their clothes. It seems like they're always thirsty or have a dry mouth. They often make excuses to go to the bathroom or outside during family time. They frequently have a cough or nosebleeds. They've shown a change in mood, like being more irritable or anxious. There's been a change in their eating habits.
If you think your child could be vaping, talk to your child's physician and/or go to teen.smokefree.gov. Learn more about e-cigarette prevention.
All right. So Go back into full screen. So yeah, if you do think that your child, could be vaping, feel free to connect with us, with Dana, with any of the staff here on the call, and we'll definitely point you out to more specific helpful resources. This just kind of summarizes the video on some of those things that you may notice, or just signs. Even if you're a teacher, if you're in the classroom, if you work in schools, these are important signs to be aware of if your student or your child is vaping. So yeah, behavior changes or difficulty concentrating. Again, it ties into that addiction where they're trying to think about when they can get their next fix or their next puff, or it might impair them from paying attention in class. Trying to hide the scent from the product that really will smell like the product that they're using. That's kind of what clings to the clothing. And then those other things like changes in eating patterns and other physical signs. And so we've also created our own version of Spot the Vape. So I showed y'all an example from social media that the tobacco company created, but we created our own. This is on page 5 of the toolkit, so you can follow along there. But I also just want to give you a few moments to look at the screen. And if you can use your chat box, feel free to put in the guesses of which ones you think are e-cigarettes. So let's just say that you're searching, you found your kid's backpack and you're looking at their belongings or their school supplies, and Dana's like, yeah, all of them. So all of them could be. And in this case, there are 6 of them. And so if you want to just take a chance and guess, you can, or if you want to, actually do it in the toolkit, you can. But I'll give you a couple of moments to think through this one. Thank you, Dana. And yeah, we know it can be hard. Don't worry if you don't know which ones, or if you're having a hard time. A lot of folks struggle with spotting e-cigarettes, and that's on purpose. That's what the companies want. And they are continually coming out with new devices, new designs, new clever ways to hide them. Thank you, Angela and Pamela. I love it. Thank you, guys. Let's go ahead and see how we did. So for sure, B is one of them. C, E, F, G, I, and J. So again, if you did get all of them, that's okay. They all could be. We've had folks tell us like, hey, I've seen D before. Like that one I've seen that is actually an e-cigarette. In this particular example, it's not, but it definitely could be. So yeah, thank you guys for participating. And if you want to share this with folks, like, hey, have them do this activity. It's just a good eye opener. Another thing that we like to do is inform our adult learners, our parents, communities about, hey, it's hard. It is hard to track these. It's hard to stay on top of it. These are examples of things that we're seeing in the market that are all e-cigarette devices. They look very different. So, that first one you see on the top left-hand corner, it's a sports watch and fitness tracker. It looks just like a smartwatch, but it's actually an e-cigarette. It will tell you the time, but it'll also tell you when your battery or e-liquid is getting low. And then, hoodies are also still available on the market. They're expensive, but they're there. And so the drawstrings are tubes that actually connect to the e-cigarette, and they're stored in the hidden pocket inside the sweatshirt. So it just look like they're chewing on their hoodie, on the string of their hoodie. But in reality, they could be vaping. Probably one of the most disturbing ones to us is the picture on the upper right. It looks like an asthma inhaler, but it's actually a nicotine delivery system. And again, kids can have this on their persons, like in middle and high school. So it's really, really hard. And there are many types of lanyards out there that youth can wear around their necks for ease of access. The one there on the bottom left is an example, and it's actually sold on Etsy because it's just an accessory, so they can sell it to anybody. And there you go, they just wear that around their necks, and it's very easy access. And then there in the middle at the bottom is a vape pen. Those are so popular, somehow they came back around. It is an actual pen, but it's a vape as well. And of course, everyone has a cell phone. Some cell phone cases can actually hold and charge the e-liquid, like the one pictured there on the bottom right. Very convenient. And then these are just examples of pictures that have been sent into us from school districts around the country of how, again, students are getting really creative in the ways that they're hiding their nicotine addiction. We want our kids to be hydrated, right? We want them to drink water, and a lot of schools allow water bottles. Well, this is an example, and I've heard of a couple of other people say like, yep, I've seen this before, of where, water bottle was confiscated by an administrator at a school. The young student had attached their e-cigarettes to the end of the straw. It looked like they were just drinking water, but they were actually using an e-cigarette. And then on the right-hand side, well, that was a Sharpie at some point, but the student took out the actual marker and put in a jewel. And you look at that, it looks just like a Sharpie. So it's just, these are just examples that we like to show folks so that you guys are aware that, it is a serious problem. This is a addiction. And we really need to treat it as such. And of course, our job at Catch is to prevent it from even happening in the first place. And kind of like what Dana said, yeah, those highlighters, I could not believe it when I saw it. One of my teacher friends posted it on Facebook a few weeks ago when school was just starting. So it was like perfect timing. They came out with these highlighters, and they're literally called Highlight. I've seen a demonstration on TikTok on how they're used. You just take off the tip and you're able to use it. And on the back end is where you charge it up. And so it is just more and more ridiculous. And you have to think, who are they marketing these products to? We also understand that, kind of coming back to this conversation around, how to address it with our children, with our kids. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the common roadblocks that we've heard about having that conversation with your child about e-cigarettes. So we'll start out with a short video, and then we'll get into a little bit of a discussion.
If you want to talk to your child about tobacco and vaping, but feel worried, nervous, or stressed, you're not alone. Here are some common reasons that parents delay having a conversation about tobacco products with their children.
They already know not to smoke or vape.
Some parents say, "Why should I talk to my kids about smoking or vaping? I already know they won't do it." It's great that you believe in your child. They probably know that smoking and vaping are dangerous and typically make good decisions. However, research shows that hearing clear expectations from you is very important and can support their decision. So, make your expectations clear and keep the conversation open. New information is coming out every single day. You can keep up by Googling CDC Know the Facts. I feel like a hypocrite. Some parents feel like a hypocrite when they tell their kids not to use tobacco products if they currently use or have used tobacco themselves. Be clear that even though you use tobacco, it's not okay for someone their age and why. Tell them that once you start, it can be really hard to quit. If you intend to quit, remind them that nicotine addiction is hard and it usually takes many attempts to quit for good. To make an attempt, call the quit line at 1-800-QUIT-NOW, 1-800-784-8669 for help. If you don't intend to quit, it's even more important to have a conversation with your child about your expectations around not using tobacco products.
My child is too young to be talking about tobacco or vaping.
It's never too early to talk to your kids about the dangers of tobacco products. Vaping and smoking are everywhere, on social media, TV, movies, and sometimes even at school. Children of all ages need to know the truth about what they might be seeing. Younger children don't need all the details, but they do need to know that tobacco products are dangerous and that you disapprove of them playing or experimenting with them. Keep the conversation short and direct. For older kids, be sure to support them in learning effective ways to say no if someone offers them an e-cigarette. It'll be uncomfortable. If you're worried that the conversation will be uncomfortable, you're not alone. Many parents get a bit nervous about talking about substance abuse and addiction with their children. It's true that some children resist serious talks, but they're still listening despite the eye rolling. Isn't it worth a few minutes of discomfort to protect your child from trouble at school or lifelong nicotine addiction? Now that you know how important it is to have this conversation with your children, be sure to continue watching the video series to get some tips on what to cover during your talk.
Awesome. All right. So we're wrapping up here the last 10 minutes or so for today. So the next thing is if you guys would like to use the chat feature, I know it's different than being in person where we can have maybe just like a conversation with our elbow partner. In this case, it's just a general chat. But if you guys want to think through these, you can think to yourself, maybe jot it down. But, were there any examples that resonated with you? Maybe there's anything specific that really got you that, maybe something that you identify with. Or maybe you want to think about the second question, if anything was helpful earlier about what we talked about and how to start that conversation with your child. So these are just things that kind of think about. Again, since we're virtual and it's kind of a general chat, you don't have to use that, but just kind of thinking through if any of those examples resonated with you. All right, and so this next one, as we wrap up, is specifically talking about how to address this with your child. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. We really hope that after today, you can think about these things that we're talking about, and think through that, read through that toolkit. So this video will just kind of give some tips on how to effectively have that conversation with your child.
Talk to your child about.
Now that I think about it, you guys can access these videos on our website. I'll share that link just for sake of time. I think that I will go ahead and not play that video. Instead, let's just go ahead and get to the slide, which has this information. This information is also on page 7 of your toolkit. So if you would like to watch that video later or just read through page 7, that works. And so these are just some things, some key things to remember. So number 1 is know what you expect. What are your expectations going into this conversation? 2, which you guys are definitely doing that now. Why is this an important conversation to have? 3, how to respond. Like, think through this, right? Like, you may get varying responses or reactions, and then of course number 4, consequences if they do it. And so these are just things to think through as you're getting ready to have that conversation. And if you've already had that conversation, this is an ongoing thing. We want to make sure that you guys understand this is not like a one and done, but it's something that you can continuously check in with your child about. And Rachel, I appreciate you putting that into the chat. And I can read that later. I can read it now, up to you. But I do appreciate you. But let's see. I hear it with parents who smoked. Oh, thank you for sharing this. Their open discussion of how complex addiction is and their regrets of starting to smoke helped prevent me from smoking despite high exposure. Oh my gosh, thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. That is super, super important, really good point that you bring up. And I think that you really do speak to, hey, this is important. And there's definitely a difference that we can make in our children's lives. Thank you. Any other points anyone wants to bring up? Or if you want to unmute, you can do that as well. You can use the chat. I appreciate that, Rachel. Angela, did you want to add something?
I just wanted to thank you so much for giving us the information that we can use ourselves and pass on to our families.
I love that. Thank you. And I get emotional, but I do hope that exactly what Angela said, you guys can just be that voice in your communities. And if you're in your spheres of influence, it does extend beyond, what you're listening to and maybe even your conversation with your kids. I hope that, at some point you guys can share this and spread the word. So yeah, thank you, Angela. And so if you are getting there, if you want to share this with someone else too, pages 8 and 9 of the toolkit as we wrap up this conversation just allows you some space to think through and even write down. I'm a big writer. I like to jot down ideas. I'm a journaler. I like to journal. So this is especially helpful for people that like to write things. Pages 8 and 9 just help you to think through and write down some responses that you might have to questions as you have that conversation with your children. So Gad, if you want to share that with someone, or if you want to do it after today's presentation, feel free. It's just a safe space for you to practice. So the last thing that I'll just mention again is that we do have a vaping prevention program for youth. It spans grades 5 through 12. It is a set of 4 classroom lessons by grade level that we train teachers in. And so if your school district's interested, they have my contact information as well on how to, get this into our schools, because as we are a prevention program, we want to prevent the problem from even starting. There are plenty of other programs out there for intervention, for cessation, which we have access to and can share resources. But at Catch and our program, Catch My Breath specifically, is about preventing it from starting. So feel free to let Dana know or myself if you have more questions. But we are happy to share any information about our vaping prevention program with you guys. So if you are following along with me, this is the last page. Absolutely. This is the last page of the toolkit. These are some tools that you can have again in your toolkit for tobacco change and just being a part of that conversation. There are different levels at which you can get involved. There are a lot of steps you can take to reduce the number of young people that use e-cigarettes. So here's just a few suggestions on how you can get involved in your community. Like I said, from that individual level all the way up to the federal level. And, I think Angela already brought this up. Don't be afraid to talk to other parents, friends, family. This could be, when you drop your kids off, or if you're having lunch with a friend. You don't have to be the expert in e-cigarettes. There's honestly a lot that we're still learning about e-cigarettes anyway. And so, start by asking if they've heard about e-cigarettes or if they have experience with e-cigarettes. And then, hey, share these resources, share what you're learning about it, share your experiences. And so, like I said, e-cigarettes are still new. Schools are working out how to address this problem. I train folks from across the country and everybody is saying the same thing. And so it is a problem, and parents are a huge part of the solution. And so, if you want to get involved at the school level, write an email, call your principals or your administrators, talk to the folks here on this call about how you guys can address, this vaping epidemic and bring some vaping prevention to your schools. And so you may, recommend using Catch My Breath. There may be room for the school, policies around e-cigarettes, or, providing support services for students, through your code of conduct. Another way to engage the school is to join the Parent Teacher Association, or to just, find out more about that or how to get involved in that at that level. And then you can use that platform to share out these resources and be a voice. You can, use our resources, you can share them, present that at a meeting if you're part of any other groups. And the last thing I want to note here is that, e-cigarette policy is still evolving. I didn't have a whole lot of time to get into the policy today, but we did touch on some of those laws, like the limited flavor bans, and that the law of 21 years and older. So anyone below 21 should not be able to purchase these products. But there's plenty of work that can still be done. So just a few examples: Campaign for Tobacco Kids and PAVE, which is the Parents Against Vaping E-Cigarettes, can really keep you up to date with the information on legislation, which is, being considered at the local, state, and federal level. And of course, it provides opportunities for you to take action. So for more information about, these partners, just, Google them, look them up, and then you can definitely learn more. And of course, you can always reach out to us. So we do appreciate you for being here today. We appreciate your interest and your passion. If you weren't passionate, you probably wouldn't have joined this call. So I know that you guys are already on your way to making a difference. So I will drop my email in the chat. I will pass it back over to our host today. And I do appreciate y'all. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Priscilla, for being here. We appreciate you guys. Our next Lunch and Learn will be October 10th, Tuesday, October 10th, with NAMI, and we'll do a Let's Talk presentation about mental health. So hopefully we will see you guys then. Thank y'all for joining us.